Hi, did you get one of these in your newspaper? I don't actually subscribe to newspaper, but my folks do, and they turn me on to this video obsession, Radical Islam's War Against the West. I think that whoever put this together and spent all that money to have these distributed, apparently it went to almost looks like a couple hundred newspapers. At any rate, I believe they are wasting their time. And the reason I say that is their conclusion is that we call on moderate Muslims to halt radical Islam. That's actually how they conclude. Now, the problem with that is they say that we should not be politically coward in our approach to this problem. And by the way, they do a good job of illustrating that it's a real problem. I think that they did a good job of that. Yes, it's a real problem, but their solution happens to be as politically coward as you can possibly get. It's totally anemic. This idea, it would be like calling on the Germans to stop Hitler in 1942. That's what their solution is. It's totally politically correct. It's politically coward. It's religiously coward, and it's doomed to failure. We're not going to get the moderate Muslims to stop radical Islam. This doesn't make sense. This is spiritual warfare. It's not one that we're going to be able to win using secular means. Okay, the enemy has a particular God. They call on that God by name, and the true God, I think, has a preference for that over the West and the Jews who are afraid to associate with a particular God. We're too coward to call on a God by name. And I think that the true God prefers, not being offended like that. And he would rather have somebody who's worshiping a false God than somebody who's afraid to associate with a particular God or call God by name. So I think that the very thing that the producers of this video fear the most is what's going to happen. That the West will succumb to Islam. Okay? If you're not going to actually do the politically incorrect thing and destroy Islam altogether, because Islam is the root, is the soil for the seeds of radical Islam. So if you're not going to get rid of the soil, then you're not going to win the war. What we need to do if the West was really going to win this is we would say Islam is a false religion, Allah is a false God, Muhammad's a false prophet, and they should be relegated to the heap of false religions and false gods like Molech and Dodan and Ashtoreth. And that's how the thing should end. Now, is it going to happen? No, because we're afraid. You couldn't say that. You could think a political leader in the West could actually get away with saying that. No, of course not. You know what I mean? So we're doomed to failure. The only thing is, I don't think it's going to be very speedily. There's still a lot of time left, considering it's 5,768 in the Jewish calendar, and that would leave 232 years till the Sabbath of 1,000-year days. And I think in the meantime we're going to see the Christianization of India and Christianization of China. And that's going to take a while for them to cycle through, and eventually, just like the West, they'll eventually become post-Christian nations, and they will eventually succumb to Islam as well. And Israel eventually will find herself surrounded by an entire, alone in an entirely Islamic world. And I think God's doing that and on purpose. That'll provide the catalyst for the prophecies of Zechariah, when they will call on God by name, and they will look on me. God says they will look on me whom they have pierced. And I think that we know that the Jewish leadership, when Jesus first presented himself as Messiah about 2,000 years ago, it was the Jewish leadership that rejected him not the common Jewish people for the most part. And I think the Bible gives us this model, this prophetic model, that although they rejected him the first time, the second time they will come to the realization that Jesus is actually the Messiah that they've rejected. The Zechariah goes on to say they will mourn for him like an only son. So this idea of trying to defeat Islam by secular means, I think, is foolish. It's certainly not spiritually enlightened in any kind of biblical sense. This attempt to, say, entice or seduce the Islamic nations with materialism, like we're doing in Afghanistan and Iran, and or Iraq, and I guess we're going to do in Iran. I don't think that materialism has the power to defeat the satanic power behind Islam. Materialism belongs to Satan as well, so you're really not going to eventually gain anything that way. You're not really fighting the battle correctly that way, and eventually we will see an Islamicized world. But in the long run, Israel will survive, according to the Bible. That once they do call on the Messiah, he will return, and that will be the end, so to speak, of the enemies of Israel. That will be the end of Islam, and the establishment of the relationship between Israel and their Messiah, Yeshua. So it's going to be a very interesting history as it unfolds. It's not going to be very pleasant for the most part, but it will end up happily ever after, so to speak, after we go through all this hellish Islamic episode. But I believe that that's what's going to happen. These anemic attempts to make appeals to the world and moderate Muslim are not going to amount to anything, and this will blow over, and we'll just continue. Nobody's going to take my advice, obviously. I mean, that wouldn't. I can't see that happening, but at least I'm getting the information out there, so when you see it happen, you can say, hey, that guy on YouTube said this would happen. So there you go. Thanks.